Pleasure to have Dr. Van Wagoner with us today. Dr. Van Wagoner is an old friend from Cleveland, Ohio. That's where one of us came from. And David received all of his degrees from Eastern College. His bachelor degree in chemistry and English literature. And then his Ph.D. in pharmacology from also a university named after a president in Pennsylvania. Then he did a postdoc at the University of Philadelphia. After that, he did in the and in 4 years in Chile. And so anyway, David is a staff member in the Department of Molecular Cardiology at Clinic-Lerner, and his academic appointment is at Western University in the Department of Molecular Medicine. And his interest and his research has been on ion channels. And more recently, he's been really interested and made very important contributions on remodeling, because of remodeling natural fibrillation. Related to ion channels, but not exclusively ion channels, but also inflammation and other regulatory processes. Thank you.
We appreciate the invitation. It is a great pleasure to visit with Dean LeBron and Chief Clerk. It's a very friendly audience. So, for those of you who haven't thought much about atrial fibrillation, I'd like to point out that this is a very age-related problem. Under 10% of people over the age of 80 have atrial fibrillation, so it affects a very substantial part of the population. And the age-relatedness suggests that degenerative changes that are associated with aging may be important with respect to treating a substrate for atrial fibrillation. AF matters not because it's intrinsically life-threatening, but because it increases risk of stroke dramatically and as well as mortality. And it can cause shortness of breath, it can cause diaphoresis, so it has an impact on quality of life. And it accounts for a lot of emergency room visits and thus increases overall health care costs. The currently available anti-arrhythmic drugs we think of as anti-arrhythmics are pretty ineffective. And there are very invasive procedures, either surgical maze procedures or endocardial ablation procedures that are more effective than pharmacologic therapies, but they are more traumatic and expensive. So with my Ph.D. in pharmacology, I still hold out the hope that safer, more effective joint therapies might be possible. So AF is a funny disease. It's not like, say, diabetes or obesity, that either you're obese or you're not obese. AF is a disease that tends to come and go. It can be paroxysms that last from a few seconds to all the time, and it varies, and probably the pattern of conduction changes from time to time, so it's kind of a very difficult disease to get a handle on. There's low AF, which occurs in the absence of structural heart disease, and they have a strong genetic component. And then there are other kinds of AF that are associated secondarily with things like hypertension, valvular disease, coronary disease, congestive heart failure. And some of these comorbidities may actually have some underlying mechanisms of common and probably are related to inflammation side of the hospital. So around 1995, Morris Alessi's group introduced the work on their goat model in which they did burst spacing to maintain atrial fibrillation. And what they showed was that within a few hours of maintained atrial fibrillation, there were changes in the relationship between the atrial effective refractory period and the pacing cycle length. And you can see that this normal pattern of urination was essentially flattened by 6 hours and sometimes even inverted within 24 hours of maintaining atrial fibrillation. So this process was termed electrical remodeling. And if you look at myocytes, or action potentials for myocytes in patients with atrial fibrillation, you can see that there are changes. And typically, if you look at right atrial myocytes, there are the tendency for these action potentials to be abbreviated relative to control, and to have a lot of the action potential classified. So, some time ago, working with Gina Long, we started working on some of the issues related to electrical remodeling. In addition to the electrical changes, there are significant structural changes associated. So this is approximately the size of a normal left atrial appendage, which typically is no more than 4 centimeters. And in patients with significant mitral valve disease, it's possible for there to be huge hypertrophy of the left atrial appendage. So this one is probably about 10 centimeters. And you can understand that there is an altered substrate for maintaining the arrhythmia. And you can also understand why a surgical procedure that removes this much tissue might help with respect to diminishing the area for the atrial fibrillation. So remodeling can have an impact on the arrhythmia persistence. And the electrical remodeling processes are typically more reversible than the structural remodeling. The electrical remodeling can occur very rapidly, within minutes or hours of atrial fibrillation. Part of it can be metabolic, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Part of it is nutritional changes, or perhaps post-translational changes that can be more persistent. The structural remodeling can occur secondarily to an infarction. There can be ectopic due to calcium overload and death of myocytes. Myocytes can hypertrophy. In addition, in response to changes in pressure, there can be chamber dilatation, accumulation of extracellular matrix, and other things that could contribute to a substrate for maintaining the arrhythmia. So if we think about issues about persistence, what drives it? You could separate it kind of based on time. So early on, you typically have brief episodes of 6 beats or a few PACs on together, in which case maybe the changes in electrical activity that are driving automaticity are more important. But with time, some of these other issues related to the structure of the atria and connections between myocytes may become increasingly important. So what we're talking about is a continuum where issues that are related to electrical remodeling and structural remodeling have varying degrees of significance. We know a lot about the ion currents and ion channel subunits that are expressed in the human atria. And for those of you that think primarily about the ventricle, you would say that the atrial action potential is kind of flat as a plateau that is much lower than the ventricular action potential. And if you look at the currents that are present in atrial myocytes relative to ventricular myocytes, the most green potassium current, IKUR, or ultra-rapid delayed rectifier, are additions to the ventricular portfolio channels. And these help with this process of early repolarization. And in addition, the transit outward current tends to be significantly larger in atrial and ventricular myocytes. So I mentioned at the time that antiarrhythmic drugs are pretty ineffective for treating atrial fibrillation. And there are multiple attempts at achieving this goal. So methadone and potassium can be used to try to treat congestion defect, like atrial fibrillation. And they obviously modify the sodium current. Verapamil is sometimes used for controlling rapid heart rate, although with the thiazine is more commonly used. Methadone is used as an antihypertensive. Sotalol and dofenylaline, another class 3 antiarrhythmics, interfere with IKR currents. And there are some currents or drugs that attempted to block IKS as a therapeutic for intervening with atrial fibrillation. But overall, sodium channel blockers are okay in patients that have lone paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, which you don't use them in the setting of coronary disease due to problems with safety. Calcium channel blockers have been essentially uneffective at treating atrial fibrillation. They can treat hypertension, and that's important, and they help to prevent substates of atrial fibrillation. But on their own, they really don't do anything for treating atrial fibrillation. The drugs that block IKR have some hope, but they tend to lose efficacy with time in atrial fibrillation, perhaps due to the concomitant electrical remodeling of the patient. But overall, you have to say that conventional antiarrhythmic drugs are pretty miserable. And if you look at patients after they've been started on a drug, less than 50% of the patients remain in therapy a year after beginning therapy. So as far as treatment goes, it's not a very effective approach. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the electrical remodeling processes that take place in that, but I would point out that calcium overload is acknowledged to be an important early step, and this has multiple downstream effects. So calcium signaling obviously is important in cardiac hypertrophy, and when calcium overload is excessive, it can cause injury and death of myocytes. And when you have myocyte injury and death, then there can be replacement fibrosis. Acutely, calcium changes can cause changes in gene expression by the NCAT signaling pathway or other transcriptional regulations. It can affect the expression of these currents. So that the currents are down-regulated in these cases. Calcium currents down-regulated, and other currents down-regulated, ultra-activated rectifier currents down-regulated. And depending on the balance of these changes, the action potential actually can be either briefer or prolonged. And it's really important to emphasize this point, because actually sometimes in the left atrium, action potential duration is not abbreviated in atrial fibrillation. But with this decreasing of that calcium current, it's typically altered contractility, and the combination of contractility changes and other inflammatory changes lead to a tendency for increase in risk of stroke. I'd also point out that innervation may have a significant role. Sympathetic stimulation can obviously correlate with calcium channel, aggregated calcium overload. Vagal stimulation can directly modulate action potential duration, and both of these, therefore, will have an impact on either the occurrence or the symptoms of atrial fibrillation. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about regulation of calcium. This team of Wagoner published a paper in 1999 that confirmed work that has been done in a rapid pacing model in dogs that showed that there is a significant downregulation of calcium current in response to thyroid activity. We studied patients with atrial fibrillation compared to control patients undergoing other kinds of cardiac surgery, like bypass surgery, and we saw typical calcium current traces look like this from the control, and the current amplitudes were much smaller in patients with persistent atrial fibrillation. This is a summary of a substantial number of myocytes from control patients and those with atrial fibrillation that is persistent. And you can see there's about a 60 to 70% reduction in the density of myocytes. So it's the calcium current that triggers release of calcium from the SR stores and underlying contractility. So not surprising that if you look at what happens to atrial contractility following atrial fibrillation, there are important changes. This is work from Louis Chatton and Martha Leppi. So they showed that if you put crystals on the atrial wall and monitor shortening of the atria, that this shortening becomes significantly reduced within, say, 12 hours of atrial fibrillation. So this is essentially like a TV loop that you see in ventricular physiology. It's really the atrial area or diameter of the pressure. And what you see is that the area encompassed here is a reflection of the work that is being done by the atrium. So the work is cut in half within 12 hours of atrial fibrillation. And it's this little circle here within 48 hours of atrial fibrillation. And there's a very substantial effect on contractility. And if you look at trabeculae isolated from either control patients or those in AF, you would see what is not surprising is a substantial reduction in atrial contractility. And it's the electrical changes that are driving the contractile changes. So if you look at the atrial refractory period plotted in the solid symbol versus atrial work index in the open symbol, the work index follows the refractory period changes very closely. And it's not hard to understand that changes in calcium currents that are critical for application contraction pathways, therefore have substantial impact on functional fluid. Why do we carry out the contractility? Again, it's because of risk of stroke. So, actually, lineage from the patient that has had a stroke and something we would like to avoid. So, calcium current regulation is important, and it can have an impact on thrombus formation, and is one of those things that we would like to avoid. So I didn't mention earlier when I was showing you the slide about the current for the presence of atrial myopathy, the transient outward current for ultra-rapid delayed rectifier. And interesting because drugs for these targets are still in development, although I'll show you that I'm not sure how hard it will go therapeutically. So the ultra-rapid delayed rectifier, again, is the current that contributes a lot to the difference between an atrial action potential and a ventricular action potential. So if you look at what happens to the action potential shape when you block the ultra-rapid delayed rectifier and the transient outward potassium current, you can see that the shape of the action potential becomes more ventricular. So this is a control canine atrial action potential, and 1 micromolar of the drug ABE0118 from Aventis, 10 micromolar, 30 micromolar. You can see this is essentially gone from the atrial to pretty close to the ventricular morphology. What happens to contractility at the same time? It's pretty interesting. You see this very significant increase in shortening of single myocytes at 1 micromolar. 10 micromolar is constant ventricular, and 30 micromolar is constant active. So, how does this work? It turns out that it's really just a change in the shape of the action potential that is deficient. So, we did experiments, really shot in several months in my lab, and we did current kind of experiments and action potential experiments. So we did experiments in which we used the waveform from action potential measuring the absence or presence of ABD. And if you use these as the command waveforms and record the shortening, you can see that the control action potential has a small shortening transient. And if you switch to the action potential with ABD waveform, you can very substantially increase shortening. And concomitantly, if you have the drug in the bath, you use the command waveform in the absence of the drug to maintain a small section. So it tells you that it's the effect of the shape of the action potential that is having a direct regulation of calcium influx in those places. And to look at the mechanism of that, we looked at the role of the calcium current. Yes.
Have you done any coding experiments
we have not done that. And actually, I was not, so I have biases, okay? And was really interested in doing that. But I think that this is interesting from an intellectual point of view to understand the response to the drug. And I think that this is interesting physiology. But, so this is what you see when you block these potassium currents, and you can see that this is the transient outward current and ultrarapid delayed rectifier part of canine atrial myocytes. And if you put a large concentration of this drug on here, you really knock the box off of both the transient outward current and the ultrarapid delayed rectifier. And you can see that the changes in the current are dose dependent. And from what I showed you about the action potentials, you can infer that the changes in shape are very directly related to this loss of repolarization. Well, why am I not so excited about this as a therapeutic treatment for atrial fibrillation? Well, in 97 with Unimone, we showed what happens potassium current in atrial fibrillation in patients that have persistent AF. So, if you compare the traces of control patients, they look much like the traces from a control dog. If you compare the traces from a patient with atrial fibrillation, you see that there's very little transient outward potassium current, and there's less ultrarapid delayed rectifier current. So the question is, if you compare these currents, what's the therapeutic benefit of further suppressing what's the advantage of further blocking these guys is going to be? Is that going to have the same kind of impact you see in the control patients? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that Ventus has stopped development of ATP-011C. I'm not privy to why that decision was made, but I have a suspicion about that. Yes. So I think that the effect of the drug is to change the waveform of the action potential. Yes. And the ultrarapid delayed rectifier current. This is pretty non-specific drug. It blocks both of those currents. But it does not have a significant effect on IPR. They look a lot at those currents. So I don't know exactly why they shelved that project, but I would suspect that there may not be a very dramatic impact on contractility if you've already lost the current that you're thinking is going to be effective modulating. So a more negative view of the current status of ion channel blocking drugs, as I talked about these before. So IKUR blockers are now still in preclinical development, and some of these have been in phase 2 development. I don't know broadly about the status of those programs, but I know that the ADP-018 project is on shelf. And more broadly, I'm concerned that ubiquitously expressed ion channels are important elements in excitable cell activity, and that messing around with these may not be a good idea. So the question is, what might the logical alternative strategy be? So if you think that calcium overload is a proximal problem and that it causes injury and contractile dysfunction, if you calcium overload myocytes, you can alter mitochondrial function, and that can increase production of oxygen, decrease utilization of oxygen effectively as a fuel. As I showed you, there are changes that can cause prothrombotic changes or inflammation that are associated with atrial fibrillation, and I'm going to show you some of those. But for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been thinking a lot about these kinds of pathways as an alternative strategy to address the problem of atrial fibrillation. So I mentioned that hypertension, heart failure, obesity, diabetes were risk factors for atrial fibrillation. And if you look at the clinical literature, you see that these conditions are associated with increased systemic inflammation, mostly as marked by increased plasma levels of C-reactive protein, which is the acute phase response protein produced by the liver. Also, there's evidence of increased oxidative stress, which could be either looking at melandialdehyde or other kind of oxidant byproducts in the plasma, or looking at tissue stains or other kinds of oxidants. There's evidence of altered mitochondrial function in atrial fibrillation. One of the earliest things that you see when you project the atrial fibrillation is mitochondrial enlargement, changes in the structure of the crystals, and especially an impact on atrial energetics. And in addition, and I'll show you some evidence for myocyte necrosis, and I showed you already atrial fibrillation. So these are all things that commonly increase with aging and may help understand the difference between AF and AF. So to think about oxidative stress, there are multiple kinds of oxidants. Some of them play an important role in normal cellular signaling. I'm going to focus on the potential impact of nitric oxide and superoxide, which can combine to form peroxynitric anions. But it's important to note that oxidants can be both endogenous of mitochondrial source or from other oxidators, or exogenous themselves that are interacting in the liver. So nitric oxide and superoxide anions interact in a diffusion-limited way to form something called peroxynitrate. And this can both modify proteins and lipids, and it's a very non-specific effect. It just forms wherever these two atoms come together. So any targeting that takes place is dependent on the targeting of generation of nitric oxide, which is produced by 3 different isoforms of nitric oxide synthase, and these are present in different cellular compartments of the myocyte, 4 different sources of superoxide anions. And in 1999-2000, we postulated that these might be important in an understanding of remodeling, ectopic, some of these other problems that are associated with it. So there are antibodies that can detect fugitively pre-nitrotyrosine, which is a byproduct of peroxynitrate, the oxidative modification of proteins. And if you look at tissues from control animals and compare it to animals subjected to 5 days of rapid atrial fibillation, there's an increase in antibody staining of the tissue. And you can see there's not very substantial structural changes with inflammatory. So if this is relevant, and you could think of antioxidants which could interfere with the modulation of protein fibers as a way of affecting what's going on. And ascorbate has been shown in biochemical experiments to prevent or to decompose the bond between peroxynitrate and protein. So in conjunction with collaborators at Ohio State University, including Cynthia Carnes and John Bauer, we looked at dogs that were subjected to 48 hours of rapid atrial fibillation. And in a way similar to what was shown in the goat model, we saw prototypic changes in refractory periods. And in animals that received substantial supplemental oral vitamin C, the time course of changes in refractory periods over the first 48 hours was slowed relative to control. Now, Sam Michel showed that by 7 days, the ascorbate was not a hugely effective therapy. And that may have to do with the pharmacokinetics of ascorbate and it being a relatively weak antioxidant. We showed that the abundance of nitrotyrosine was increased, the tissue ascorbate was decreased in animals subjected to rapid atrial basis, and the supplemental ascorbate tended to reverse those changes. So it's interesting that superoxide production can be attenuated by statins. And the way that this takes place is that where superoxide is commonly produced by NADPH oxidase, and there's a lot of interest in this with drug target. NADPH oxidase activity is dependent on a small G protein called RAC. And when RAC is phenylated, it can help activate NADPH oxidase. Statins suppress phenylation when decoy is reductive, and therefore they can decrease production of superoxide. There's some very nice work from the group at Emory that shows the production of superoxide in response to the Dan Mattel showed that ascorbate was pretty ineffective after 7 days of rapid atrial pacing with respect to changing the refractory. However, treatment of these dogs subjected to rapid atrial pacing with simvastatin, which suppresses NADPH oxidase activity, was pretty effective in preventing electrical death. So, the changes in effective refractory period are largely due to the changes in calcium content. I'm going to show you some evidence that may not be transcriptional downregulation in the protein of the calcium channel, rather than it may reflect post-translational regulation. So I showed you that the calcium current is downregulated in AF. Willie Schotten, again, Dr. Valenti's group in the Netherlands, did Western blots of tissues from patients with atrial fibrillation. So, sinus rhythm, atrial fibrillation, sinus rhythm, atrial fibrillation. This is against an alpha-1C or 4-form study. And it's whether you look at patients with coronary artery disease and sinus rhythm in AF, or mitral valve disease and sinus rhythm in AF. There was nothing close to being a statistically significant difference in forming substance expression. And similarly, if you look at the native use of it, if you look at other substances, but this is a pretty impressive study that used both Western and dihydropyridine binding assays to suggest that there was not important difference.
There is some data from blood levels, alpha-1D, the replacement of blood vein in country, but is there any evidence about even switching blood vein to alpha-1D?
Not that I'm aware of, but I mean, the chance that alpha-1D is even expressed in the future could have a functionally important role, and it's potentially an interesting target. So, several years ago, we did some experiments that were kind of messing around with the idea that we think so the fire in the atria, I'm suggesting is caused by using too much oxygen. And to try to put out the fire in the atria, you can think about adding antioxidants. So one of the things that we tried was using N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor of glutathione. And I'll show you, so this is measurement of tissue glutathione from control patients, patients in AF at the time of surgery, patients with a history of AF but in time living at the time of surgery. And so you can see that there's a substantial reduction in tissue glutathione levels. So we tested the idea that adding glutathione might have its impact on the outside calcium here. And we were actually surprised. So in some patients that had especially paroxysmal AF, when you added N-acetylcysteine, and you compare this curve to this curve, there can be a huge increase in the curve. And it essentially can wipe out the effects of adding epidurals in terms of these monocytes. This does not occur in every patient. And it appears to be tied to how much glutathione depletion there is. And I can't say for sure that there is some other kind of a signaling pathway going on. It's a very dramatic effect. And if you look at a myocyte from a control patient, I didn't put all the slides in there. There's very little response to additional glutathione in a control patient. And we did experiments with dogs that were treated with a drug that depletes glutathione, and you can recapitulate the same kind of thing. So we are trying to understand what's happening here. And there is a process whereby there can be a post-translational modification of the L-type calcium channel by glutathione interacting with nitric oxide. And so essentially what you're doing is modifying a substrate on the channel. And so what we're showing here is that there is intense, so there's a procedure called the bias switch technique, in which reactive groups that can be nitrosylated can be labeled with biases. And you can see that there are several different kinds of proteins that can be bioassimilated. One up here is very high molecular weight, molecular adenine. We were most interested in this lane here that is preferentially bioassimilated in the patients that have atrial fibrillation. A challenge that we ran into was finding good human L-type calcium channel antibodies, and we ended up collaborating with the same group whose work I showed you earlier in Germany. So they probed the blocks that we sent them that had been probed for bioassimilation with an antibody against the two species of the L-type calcium channel or the N-terminate. You can see that one of these antibodies preferentially recognize something that was higher in this area that was bioassimilated. And some of these antibodies recognize both the higher and the bands that ran at the same level as the bioassimilated protein. So if you overlay these, you can see that some of these antibodies are recognizing proteins at the same position as the bioassimilated protein. So we're pretty sure that this bioassimilated protein is helping calcium channel. So we think this might be an interesting way in which a non-transcriptional, rather post-translational modification has an important impact on the function of the calcium channel.
So there's these post-translations of the formulation.
So we have not, that's a good possibility. And we have not looked specifically at this, but that is kind of calling out right now. We only got this population data back.
So if you said the bad thing, the old one, maybe the fourth, did you get a handle on what that one is?
No, we didn't.
Is that possibly active?
There are a number of proteins that have been identified as targets. So circuit is also going to no. I think it's 80 or 90 of them. So when we looked at the levels of nitrosylation, it's interesting, there appears to be an inverse relationship between how nitrosylation and the tissue content of which the protein was studied. So again, this is new data, and we're still in the process of figuring out what all these things that are doing. So nitrosylation is different than protein nitration by peroxidation. But it's possible that some of these processes may be different ends of the same spectrum. That you could have covalent modifications by nitration on the same or related sites that are modified by nitrosylation. Nitrosylation can be competed away by adding exogenous glutathione, those are reversible processes. So, by chopping up the available nitric oxide, superoxide, and therefore peroxynitrite, decreases bioavailable nitric oxide levels. When you subject, in this case, pigs to rapid atrial pacing, you see that there is a reduction in nitric oxide levels. And the intriguing thing is that the greatest reduction is in the left atrial appendage and the left atrium. And this tends to be the area where most thrombi form. And nitric oxide is very effective at preventing activation and adhesion of platelets as one of the first steps in thrombi formation.
That brings up an interesting question. A lot of the common wisdom has been that clot formation is a consequence of blood flow and reduced blood flow. That if you actually look at blood flow through the atrium, even during atrial fibrillation, the active component of the atrial contraction only really adds a small percentage to the amount of contraction in blood flow that occurs. And I've often wondered if the reason clots form is not necessarily the reduction of blood flow, but is actually a problem of something that's on the surface of the atrium. This is a very interesting idea.
That's possible. So, and I'm going to show you that we think that glucoside adhesion and glucoside infiltration may be an important part of changing the substrate in atrial fibrillation. So, nitric oxide availability, I suggested, is dependent on whether or not it's consumed or used up by peroxide. And one interesting thing is that production can be shear dependent. So, endothelial form of nitric oxide synthase is present on the endocardium, and some production may be lost by the loss of shear due to the loss of blood flow. And again, this has an important effect on adhesion and activation of platelets. So, the first evidence of inflammatory changes in atrial fibrillation were offered by Musashi and colleagues in 1997. And they were pretty bold and did biopsies of patients with bone atrial fibrillation, septal biopsy, fortunately. And when they looked at these histologically, they found evidence of structural abnormalities, including increased fibrosis between myocytes, hypertrophy of myocytes, or these islands of mononuclear cell infiltrates that were compatible with myocarditis or inflammatory problems in a substantial part of the patient, and the rest of them had fibrosis, which may be a later stage of the disease. So I had an internal medicine resident spend 6 months in my lab this past year who did some beautiful confocal microscopy. And he was scanning for a number of different kinds of cells. I'm just going to show you this one, CD3 as a marker of T cells. And what we found was that there were many AS patients that had CD3 cells that were localized around bundles of myocytes. And in this case, alpha-actinin is used to stain for the myocytes and nuclei, so the blue is vacuum. If you look, the patients in atrial fibrillation, 11 out of 14 had significant infiltration of T cells versus 4 out of 10 of the sinus filling patients. So this is the tissue area that was occupied, and this is percent. So it's only a small area, 0.4%. You can see that the patients that were in AF had a significantly greater fraction of the tissue area that was occupied by T cells than those that had a history of AF and were sinus rhythm, and those that had bone AF that were sinus rhythm controlled. So it appears that being in AF is pro-inflammatory stimulus. And this is myeloperoxidase, which is present in neutrophils and macrophages and monocytes. And if you look at the distribution of myeloperoxidase, which is this brown stain, it ends up in the same places that if you use Mason's trichromes are those areas that are becoming fibrotic. And you can see that there's cellular infiltration that corresponds to the myeloperoxidase positive cells. So it's interesting that myeloperoxidase can consume nitric oxide and generate oxidants that can also modify the chemicals. So to get back to aging and inflammation, it's interesting that if you look at rats, in young rats and old rats have a higher C-reactive protein level than the young rats. And if you look at their antioxidant capacity, it is reduced in the old rats relative to the young rats. So I'm suggesting that systemic inflammation and oxidant stress are related phenomena. Interesting and harder to apply here is their observation that if you did a 40% caloric restriction, you could prevent these changes in C-reactive protein levels and most of the changes in antioxidant capacity. How many of us want to go on a 40% caloric restriction? It's hard to say. Probably not too many of us. So, several years ago, we looked at what happened to plasma C-reactive protein levels in patients with atrial fibrillation. And we saw that there was a stepwise increase in CRP levels in patients that had AF compared to control, and that it was a greater increase in patients with persistent AF than in very simple AF. And therefore, we associated with this C-reactive protein and systemic inflammation with some factors that were related to increased arrhythmic resistance. And based on the slide that I showed you before, you can think that maybe some of these inflammatory and pro-fibrotic changes that might increase arrhythmic resistance could be related to. We were able to validate our observation in a relatively small subset of patients in a larger clinical trial, the Cardiovascular Health Study, in which 5,806 patients had baseline C-reactive protein levels taken, and there was a 7.5-year follow-up. And if you just look at baseline CRP versus what happened to the patient, baseline CRP predicted baseline occurrence of AFib and the future development of AFib. This doesn't look like a big difference. This is just relative to the median level. And high CRP is considered 3 milligrams per liter. It's not even talking about what's high, it's just above and below the median. And this is a highly significant effect because of the sample size. So systemic inflammation has an impact on the development of atrial fibrillation, and how that works we really don't know. One hypothesis that we have is that CRP can be binding to the membranes of injured cells. So it can bind to oxidized phospholipids, and these are typically only on the inner surface of cell membranes. But if you have a membrane inversion due to calcium overload, they expose these sites for CRP binding, and then it can participate in common fixation and further injury and removal of myocystis. It's interesting that Stefan Hatemser showed that there was evidence of substantial ectopic using tunnel stains in tissues from patients with atrial fibrillation. And if you look at CRP levels in patients that have stroke risk, it shows you that the normal level is under 3. Patients at stroke risk have very elevated levels of C-reactive protein. And the more CRP, the greater the stroke risk essentially. So a question that we asked was, is CRP present in the fibrillary matrix? And in the past year, we finished a series of studies. I'm just going to show you a representative image from 2 patients that had similar plasma CRP levels. This one in sinus rhythm, this one in AF. And obviously there's much more brown stain in this patient that had atrial fibrillation. And this was a general observation. suggesting that CRP binding does occur, and that it preferentially occurs in the patients that are actively in atrial fibrillation. So to do this study, Stavros compared patients that have similar median CRP levels as close as you can match them. The lone AF patients all have lower CRP than the other guys, so they're not exactly comparable. You can see that positive CRP was comparable between these groups, but yet the patients that were in atrial fibrillation had a trend for a greater CRP than those that were either in sinus rhythm or had a history of AF or in sinus rhythm, suggesting that this is a dynamic process. So this also relates to post-operative atrial fibrillation, and there's a very nice study from Burns and colleagues who showed that IL-1, IL-6 go off immediately after surgery. Creatine protein levels increase more slowly, peaking 2 to 3 days after surgery, and this is the time period during which the atria are vulnerable to developing post-operative atrial fibrillation. Studies with Dr. Waldo we had shown that the C-reactive protein changes are very similar, and Dr. Schussler has done very similar kinds of studies in surgical models as well. Dr. Waldo has shown that atrial fibrillation typically occurs in his pericarditis model the first couple of days after surgery, and atrial flutter becomes later after surgery. If you look at the cellular infiltration, then this is partly an artifact of the model in which ALK is applied to the epicardium of the atrium. As you can see, there's extensive infiltration of neutrophils that mark by myocytes positive cells in pericarditis, and tissue injury that results from this kind of inflammatory injury. And it's interesting to note that you can block this prednisone. You can see that while it didn't block all the cellular infiltration, it blocks the myeloperoxidase positive infiltration. So this had a significant impact on the occurrence of atrial flutter. Interestingly, it didn't affect the frequency of inducibility of AF with stasis, suggesting that these may be somewhat different mechanisms. You can see that prednisone very substantially reduced the peak CRP levels, and it came back to baseline much quicker than in the animals that were not treated. And Dr. Schussler's group has quantified myeloperoxidase activity in tissues and shown that the more myeloperoxidase that's present, the greater the inhomogeneity of conduction. So, how does that work? One possibility is that there is changes in the activity of, or expression of connectins. This is some human studies, and this is a human atrium in sinus rhythm. You can see the recycled organization of connectin 43, and this becomes lateralized in patients that have atrial fibrillation. If you look at connectin 43 across the atrial wall, in an animal that has pericarditis, you can see that there is a good distribution of connectin 43 in the endocardium. It's mostly preserved in the mid-myocardium. And then, here where there's more tissue injury, you lose connectin 43 expression. And this has to occur gradually over time, and may create part of the substrate for the injury if you have either that this could affect the velocity of infection. So this all suggests, though, that inflammation can alter both the viability of myocytes and the connection between myocytes. So steroids are one possible way to address that. Kumagai, who had trained with Dr. Waldo, has shown statins, like the statins, were also pretty effective at preventing these changes. So this is the same pericarditis model. injury caused by arthritis in this dog, and in the dogs who were treated with defermentatin, you can see there was much less extensive tissue injury, less development of fibrosis. So statins are another way of attacking inflammation. And poor guy showed that there was a lower C-reactive protein on post-op day 2 than in control, and that episodes of induced atrial fibrillation were briefer in the animals that were treated with defermentatin. So this suggests that statins might actually be a potential therapeutic antiarrhythmic approach for treating and or preventing atrial fibrillation. I mentioned that we had tried steroids in paraplegic dogs, and it's interesting that there was a study in patients that were given relatively low doses of glucocorticoid treatment following first diagnosis of atrial fibrillation. And they suggested that there was a lower recurrence of atrial fibrillation and less development of persistent atrial fibrillation in patients that were treated this way. This is not a very optimal kind of treatment strategy because of the side effects associated with the long-term steroid therapy, including problems with glucose metabolism, healing, many kinds of side effects. But it's interesting for the principle for the case. One of our anesthesiologists looked at the impact of treatment of patients with dexamethasone. In a pilot study, it appeared that dexamethasone treatment was associated with a lower incidence of post-operative atrial fibrillation. And they randomized, well, still a very small study, with only 36 patients in the placebo group and 34 in the dexamethasone group. They found that C-reactive protein levels were lower in the dexamethasone treatment group, but only by a little bit. And it turned out that this kind of an effort was not sufficient to have a statistically significant impact on the current post-operative care. So back to statins, there's epidemiologic evidence suggesting patients, whether or not they have hyperlipidemia, but were treated with a statin, had less recurrence of atrial fibrillation. And in some treatment trials, atrial fibrillation recurrence was prevented by giving these patients performance, which has been shown to be most potent and lower in C-reactive protein. So the question is, can there be other drugs that are either more selective or more effective than statins and steroids? And we really don't know that. These are some of the questions that you asked. But it's like the beauty of the talk, interventions are often most effective when given earlier. And so we can think about maybe targeting triggers for AFib, which we talked a lot about, or the persistence, which is really the realm of the structural remodeling intervention. So we know that a lot of AFib comes from ectopic, begins in the area of the pulmonary vein. The mechanisms of this, I would say, are still undecided. There's potentially altered expression of a variety of channel proteins, abnormal calcium handling is implicated, neural activity is implicated, and this is an interesting thing to look at here. One interesting study from mice showed that if you create an inflammatory tachycardia by giving mouse mice sepsis, they develop an inflammatory tachycardia. And they showed that in mice in which you knock out the thromboxane A2 or PDF2 receptor, you could prevent the tachycardic response, suggesting some of these arachidonic-derived lipid metabolites could be important. And this suggests that maybe some things like fish oil, which have been shown to have some efficacy in preventing AFib, could be impacting perhaps the success the activity of the topic profile. Another area I'm interested in looking at further. So we're doing some studies now in our new laboratory for looking at some whole animal studies. And I'm trying to address some of these questions. You can see that following cardiac surgery, we can see a very substantial increase in the frequency of atrial ectopic peaks, and there's a small increase in particular as well. Following cardiac surgery in which we remove part of the left atrial appendage and use time zero control for biochemistry and electrophysiology, and then try to evaluate the impact of various treatments on both the occurrence of atrial ectopy, the tachycardic response, and the mechanism of the tools of probing the link between inflammation and atrial ectopy. So, to summarize in general, aging promotes toxin and inflammatory changes. Endothelial dysfunction is marked by the same kinds of things that cause hypertension, coronary disease, and all of these things can help to promote an environment that leads to hemodynamic overload, ion channel dysfunction, interstitial fibrosis, and diabetes and obesity can increase the oxidative and inflammatory burden, accelerating the rate of disease progression. So what do we take away from this? One is that there are things that we can do for ourselves. Diet and exercise have an important impact on both of these kinds of things. And I would suggest that we should probably try to do that first. And if we can't do that, then it's possible that in contrast to the targeted different ion channels that move out the inflammatory pathways, they have potential from target. We expect a decrease in the incidence of AFib, decrease in the burden, and a decrease in the resistance. Colleagues, clinics, surgery, team, as long as friends and mentors, Wagoner, and colleagues at Acute, and funders. Thank you.
For the information. Anybody who has questions, could you make some comments on NSAIDs and also cytokines, and they play a role? I noticed you focus particularly on your C-reactive protein, but the signals from C-reactive protein are on one out of physics and valvular, and I was wondering.
Yeah, no, I think that those are very logical things to look at further. We have not done so yet just because of the lack of money and manpower.
Because particularly with some of the cytokine inhibitors with the cardiovascular, they're relatively safe to take, one of the times we found in our dog studies with using steroids for long periods of time, we recently just done a study that we've done even a lot longer. They soak them back with sharp action configuration, fractures do be very high risk of starting configuration, independent of everything else that's going on. Just if you get the dogs down with a fracture group that's 130 to 150, and you get steroids for long periods of time, you end up having fractures at 70 or 80. I think that may be part of the problem in one study with all those groups. They couldn't get rid of it.
There was a shorter refractory period.
They were shorter refractory period. Even in normal dogs, they were shorter refractory period. That's not the thing to get configuration. Second, to be true of people, so it's made for about 1
What else have you found in terms of remodeling the flexibility in the atrium?
Yeah, we have not done much with Clinic-Lerner yet. Undergraduate students are looking at the effect regulation of phosphorylation of Clinic-Lerner. And it's been a challenging process to make sense of it. She's made good progress, but we haven't got to Clinic-Lerner yet.
So are there changes in phosphorylation?
There are. She's going to be presenting a poster at Biophysics. So it appears that there is more phosphorylation. So this is based on studies using an antibody that detects non-phosphorylated series B58. And her data is consistent in a group of matched patients with the idea that there is increased phosphorylation or lower NP levels in the patients that have AFib compared to either the history of AFib and penicillin or the actual control. So, and there is some data from a group in Germany, Wagoner who worked with Andy Mark, looking at granidine receptor phosphorylation, which seems to be hyperphosphorylated all kinds of diseases. It could be similar kind of regulation to that. So altered regulation of phosphorylation could be relevant, although it's hard to say. We're trying to do some functional studies in pairs worldwide.
Is there any genetic changes in the expression
So the problem is there's tremendous variability from specimen to specimen. And if there are, I'm not saying that there are not, but they're not detectable.
Any other? Well, thank you very much for